Aloha and welcome back to another of our positional draft preview episodes of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. The podcast where two dudes plus one Sarah Kelliher go over everything green and gold. I'm Mike, that's Iowa Joe, and today we humbly welcome one of Packer Day, one of the I've got to say it, Sarah. That was really impressive too when you retweeted that you are one of the 30 under 30 from UCF. Sarah, please welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast as we were kind of recapping off air. Sarah, please give yourself a couple minutes to just give yourself a spiel on everything you do that covers the Packers.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me back. Excited to be back. I was mentioning before, I usually don't do draft stuff, and this is kind of my annual commitment to talking about the draft, my one time to shine. So happy to be here. Also, absolutely loved that intro. I don't know how anyone can be in a bad mood after hearing that. So feeling good, happy to be here. As far as what I do, I used to write game recaps for Cheesehead TV. That's kind of how I entered into the Packers blog sphere, if you want to call it that. And then started in the first year that Pack a Day podcast was a thing. Just started getting more involved with that. Once I joined Cheesehead, Andy Herman invited me on an episode. I had a lot of fun doing it and basically told him, hey, if you ever need any help, let me know. And then that's really the beginning of then how I ended up with Dusty and Steve. And now the three of us are on every Wednesday. We've been doing that for 5 years, which is insane. I don't write for Cheesehead anymore, just based on schedule and things happening with work and job. The podcast is a little easier to swing just once a week, for an hour or so. So that's what I do right now, and I love it. It's introduced me to a lot of great people that I would have never met, like the two of you, and just love connecting, whether it's on Twitter or through other shows like this. And yeah, that's pretty much my Packers spiel. Not too much going on right now, in the off season, but always a lot to talk about.
Awesome stuff. And I guess just one question for you, Sarah. Um, have you recovered from 2018, which was your pin tweet for the longest time? I remember.
Yeah, I think it still is my pin tweet because I'm not sure that I've experienced anything like that since then. And for those listening that don't know what we're talking about, I was at the Packers Bears game week 1, the my knee game, as people have trademarked it now. And it was absolutely incredible. And that was also the first game recap that I ever wrote for Cheesehead. So quite the quite the start there. And yeah, my pin tweet, if you check it out on my profile, is just kind of a immediate reaction to the end of that game and how it felt. So yeah, that'll probably be my pin tweet for life at this point.
Well, and
Awesome
also
stuff.
you just came back from a worldwide trip, and you had some nice pictures put up the other day. So are you recovered from the jet lag yet, or you still got a few days left to get that straightened out?
Yeah, so I feel like I've finally kind of returned back to my normal routine. It was absolutely fantastic trip. Totally once in a lifetime to go to South Africa and experience a wildlife photography safari like that. But yeah, it's a lot. I mean, it was basically 24, 25 hours of travel. So, it's not for the weak in that sense. And big time difference. So yesterday was kind of the first day that I was able to just sleep in, not have to set an alarm, get up and do anything. So I'm feeling good today after I finally got some sleep. Because it was pretty much go, go, go right when I got back, back to work, just kind of trying to get back into the swing of things. So I'm very happy to just be kind of hanging out tonight, talking to you guys, and not have really anything outside the norm happening for the next bit.
So did you? I got to know. Did you bring a lion cub home with you? Because those things, when they're like that big, are like the most adorable things in the world.
Joe, I don't know if I would have gotten through customs with one of those, but it was pretty cool to see things. We didn't see any lion cubs, but we saw some zebras, some young
There you
zebras,
go.
some young giraffes, things like that, and just seeing them in the wild is totally different from any other experience, whether you go to a zoo or just wherever you go. Just seeing them in that space was pretty insane. That's the best word I can use to describe it. um So no, unfortunately, I didn't bring any lion cubs back with me.
Well, now we know what we got to do once this podcast really takes off. Kawano, is we're going to South Africa.
All right, I guess I'll start pooling my frequent flyer miles. But no, thank you so much for being with us, Sarah. Like you said, we really do appreciate that your lone draft obligation of the year is with Ohana Packers. Like I said in the intro, today is running back day. And it's funny that we're recording this now because just last week, we had Silverstein. He had the tweet where he kind of noted that the Packers, skeleton plan for the offseason is they're looking to renegotiate with Aaron Jones to keep him for the immediate future. Hypothetical, that's probably going to be 2 to 3 years, the title window that they're looking at. Dylan is not likely to be back around, and they're looking to bolster the position in the draft. So that's sort of the quick and dirty on the Packers roster construction as it goes in. I feel like that's kind of posturing by the team, but for all intents and purposes, we saw how important Aaron Jones is to this Packers team. Just what the team was without him throughout the season when he was injured or limited, and what he was for what the team was once he came back healthy, and that the postseason that he was able to put together. So that's the snapshot on the roster as a whole. Just kind of figuring that means that they're going to come out of this draft with 2 to 3 running backs. How early or late they get those guys is going to kind of depend on where the board falls. But do you guys kind of foresee it that way too, or any chance you guys think that both Dylan and Jones are back again?
It's kind of funny because Gutekunst has mentioned several times lately that with the draft capital that they have, they're not adverse to going out and getting a veteran player with their draft capital. So it makes me wonder if maybe he's got and we know that the rumors were high that they were, talking to the Colts about Jonathan Taylor before, when all that drama was going down. So maybe the thought is that they can get a young veteran running back with one of their draft picks. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I've said it all season that I really didn't see Dylan back. Yeah, he's a feel good story where he really took to the Packer community, the whole mayor of Door County thing and all that, but he wasn't really putting it together on the field when we needed it on the field. Yeah, he had his moments. Yeah, he was looking good in 1 or 2 games, but when it came down to absolutely needing to be that dominant power back, he just wasn't there for it. So that doesn't surprise me that the top brass is ready to move on from him. And I even got my jersey on right now. Aaron Jones and Tom Grossi said it, and a lot of other people have said it. He just needs to have a contract for life because, yeah, he's pretty much the playmaker that the Packers need at that position when healthy. And off the field, he does just as much in the Packer community as you would think, what A.J. Dillon is. But he does what A.J. Dillon does, but has the production on the field is what I guess I'm trying to say with it. So, just get it worked out. Obviously, they want to reduce the cap number. $12 million is kind of high for a guy who has the injury history he has and is on the wrong side of 29, and which is weird to say when I'm sitting at almost 38, Quano's over 30. It's kind of sad when you got to say 29 is old, but I do think that they'll at least come out with one draft pick. Hopefully it's a higher draft pick, but I'm not gonna say that they won't try to trade for somebody. So that's my gut feeling right now.
Yeah, I think it's all within the opportunities that present themselves to the Packers here. And I agree with everything you both said about Aaron Jones. He not only is he the playmaker on this team, but he's the heartbeat. It really seems like people follow his lead. There's the moment where he physically lifted someone's head up when they put their head down, and a lot of people thought that that was a turning point for the Packers. Just what his leadership when he's there, when he's healthy and playing, is huge, but also just a presence in the locker room. Even when he's hurt, you heard that he was helping guys out. He was being there for the young receiving core and just making sure that everybody felt comfortable. And with AJ Dillon, I think, if he was willing to take a significant pay cut, that the Packers would probably make it work with him. But let's be real. He's a young NFL player. I think he loves Green Bay. He absolutely embraced the culture, but they're there to make money, just like anybody is in any job, whether you work an office job, if you're an NBA player, if you're an NFL player. And, he has a family. He's probably going to think, what's best for me and my family? It's probably to not take that pay cut and try to negotiate anything and just agree that, hey, this was a good run. We're going to go our separate ways and here we go. And I'll try to land somewhere else. So it sucks because he is, like you said, Joe, great story and just somebody who was loved by the fans and really by the whole town. But I think it's just for the best, honestly, for everybody involved. So certainly, think they'll look at probably 2 in the draft, and then depending on what happens in the offseason, who's available, who's not, what's the price. I think something that'll be interesting is to see what happens with Derrick Henry and where he lands, and that'll probably set the market for some of the other free agents that are available. But I think, he's obviously the top of what's available, and then that'll set the market and they'll try to figure it out from there.
Right. And, you're completely right with the AJ Dillon thing. Is if he was at, let's say, the Aaron Jones point where he's already had a couple contracts in and he was willing to take a discount, then I think the Packers would work with him. But I also think he's going to want to go to a team that will utilize his strengths, and his strengths wasn't running in the zone run offense. He needs to be fed, 20 to 25 handoffs a game to be able to get going. So there's just so much. You kind of put the scale out there at, okay, well, I'm really integrated into the culture. I'm this, and this, but I would take less money and my skills aren't used as well, or do I go where the more money is? And I think it's just, the sad truth is the NFL is a business. And as much as we love these feel good stories and everything else, they're going to get what they want to get out of it. And, the whole after the career is when he can come back and be integrated into the Packers culture again, like many other, Leroy Butler and guys, and Gilbert Brown and guys like that, who after their careers were done came back and started building that repertoire again with the fans and the community.
Yeah, like you both kind of said, it's unfortunate because AJ is such a likable guy, but the machine keeps churning and time waits for no one in this business. So my biggest regret or unfortunate circumstance of Dylan's situation is that he didn't get to play what was it, the last like 4 games or whatever of the season, so he didn't get to his he missed beating the Bears in week 18, so he didn't get like his send off, so to speak, at Lambeau. So that's a bummer that he didn't get to kind of go out on his terms in that sense, but we wish him the best. And yeah, I do think it's a formality in terms of Jones. That's the whole thing with that, is if the team is serious about putting its best foot forward to try and win a Super Bowl in the next 2 to 3 years, the cap is important and all that kind of stuff, but damn the torpedoes and full speed ahead, kind of with Jones's cap number in 2028. You need that guy. You don't have another one on the roster. And we'll see what their plan is at the position coming into this draft, because the whole process that led to Dillon becoming a draft pick back in 2020 was this idea that they were going to have this thunder and lightning combination between Jones and Dillon. And do they now try to repeat that, or do they pivot and just say, let's just draft all the Aaron Jones type running backs that we can, which I think is what they should be doing for this offense, especially with Love acquitting himself so well at the position. So as we just dive into it, Green Bay has trends at the position. People will kind of question, how much do they hold to that and stuff. And, between Gutekunst and Thompson, the quick and dirty of it is they don't draft guys who are shorter than 5'9". They don't draft guys who are lighter than 205 pounds. And they do prefer, decent to better athletes than not. And in terms of the height, Goot has actually drafted guys who are taller than 5'10". And in weight, he's actually drafted heavier running backs than Thompson did. He's stuck to, I think, Dexter Williams was the lightest guy at 212 that he's drafted. So that's kind of the, people will say, do they bend? Do they do this? Do they do that? It's always on the table. I think Gutekunst has shown that he's willing to step outside the box a little bit more than Thompson was in the past. We've seen Gutekunst draft guys who are older, positions that are quote unquote not as valuable, when he took Quay Walker in the first round a couple years ago. So, Goot has slowly but surely kind of bucked some of these trends that, we've seen kind of drawn in the sand from the time that Thompson was GM back in 2005. But running back is a position that, they haven't spent a super premium pick. I think the earliest guys they've picked at the position are Eddie Lacy and Brandon Jackson in the second round. And other than that, they've kind of stuck to round 3 and later picks on the position. But Sarah, off the bat, who is your guy in this draft class that you've liked?
Yeah, so I think this class overall it's kind of unique. It's way different from last year's draft class for running backs. It's this year is solid, but it doesn't have necessarily the star power last year when you had guys like Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs that went top 12, and which only like 5 other running backs have been selected that high in the last decade. So, everyone, when we did this last year and everyone was kind of talking about draft last year, it was, yeah, those guys could go 1. And in this day and age of the NFL, it takes a really special talent to do that. I'm not sure that there's that level of hype this year. I think if it happens, it would be, late in the first round, but most likely it'll be in the second. But I think there's still a lot of solid options this year. And for the Packers, there'll probably be a few that are available in kind of their sweet spot, like you were just saying, Mike, of where they usually pick. Personally, for me, I really like Trey Benson from Florida State. I've watched, a lot of Florida State games, just being in Florida, having friends that are Florida State fans, and watch the games with them. But I think, based on the injury to Jonathan Brooks, obviously he's number 1 in everyone's eyes, but the ACL injury is the big, lingering factor. I think he would have definitely gone first if he didn't have that injury. But I think since he's injured, and that's such a big thing in the NFL, people are always afraid to take a risk, that I think Trey Benson could potentially be the first off the board. People call him Forrest Gump because of his running style. And I thought that was hilarious. And, he's great at forcing missed tackles, and he's really just was so slippery at FSU. He had an injury back in 2020, transferred from Oregon, and then really just kind of found his place in that offense at FSU. 25 touchdowns and over 2,200 all-purpose yards on just 349 touches. That's pretty damn impressive. So I think another thing that I really like about him, and I've talked about this on Pack a Day a lot too, whether it's on offenses or defense, but I just love that he's not afraid to make contact. I absolutely love that in a running back. And I think if, just thinking kind of dream pick for the Packers, do I think this is going to happen? No. But like for translating it to the Packers, like having someone who can complement Jones, who is not afraid to kind of bulldoze through some people, like everyone kind of hoped AJ Dillon would be. And then, Benson's also a great pass catcher and pass protector, which in this day in the NFL, is a must-have. You know, I think before it used to be, oh, it's nice if we have a running back and they have decent hands and we can utilize them. Now it's like, no, you need to be able to run and you have to be able to catch, just with what's happening. I think if there's, you know, a red flag or any concern, is just dependability with his health and just being consistent. You know, he had I think it was against Syracuse, he had a little case of the dropsies, which people got all upset about, but then turned it around. And then, you know, he did have that major knee injury in 2020. And yes, that's years ago, but those things linger and follow you forever in the NFL. And people might take, or scouts and GMs might take that into consideration. And I could see where he could kind of fall, but I think he's going to be a great player in this league. Just really exciting. One of my best friends goes to FSU, and, you know, I texted him and said, what should I know about Trey Benson besides what I already know? And kind of spewed off a couple of things. And he just responded and said that he got snubbed by the college football playoff. So that's how FSU fans are still doing.
Yeah, there's not much more I can add to that, because I watched some of Trey, and of course, Quano and I are part of friend of the show Brian Maffey's group chat on DMs and on Twitter. And one of the first things I asked is, okay, what are some names that I need to look for? You know, I see that, you know, the Texas kid Brooks was everybody's consensus number one with the talking head media. So I said, hey, you know, give me some names so I know what I need to be watching for. And Brian said, you know, had it not been for that injury history, Trey Benson would be the number one guy in this year's draft. So, you know, yeah, everything that I watched on him, I completely agree. I got my old trusty handy dandy notebook out again this year. And, you know, good speed, good push, good wiggle, you know, good pass catcher, basically everything Sarah just said. So if somehow he falls to one of the second round picks that the Packers have, I got to say they'd have to pull the trigger.
100%. Yep.
There's no way they can pass on that. That would basically be like the Eddie Lacy draft pick, where everybody thought he was going to be the first round, and he kept falling and falling, and finally it's like, all right, he's here, we got to take him.
No, yeah, I'm with you guys on Benson. Really like him as a prospect. Kind of like Sarah pointed out, the thing that stands out is he does everything that Green Bay wants their running backs to do well. You know, pass game, just his ability to create an explosive when an explosive doesn't look like it's there at the snap of the ball. And, you know, that's kind of like we kind of said, like, you know, Dylan had his moments, he had his highs, but also there were times where he just so often left you wanting a little bit more out of him in a down-to-down situation. And Benson offers you that game-breaking potential. And yeah, like it's a funny thing, because on one hand you're kind of like, oh, how much did his injury questions you know, bog his stock down for a team like Green Bay and all. But I also do wonder, and you know, this is one of those things that we'll never know the answer to, but you know, Gutekunst, he has 11 picks in this draft. We've seen that he's a madman and he will use every one of his picks. Like last year, I don't think anyone thought he would take, what was it, like 14 players or whatever it was, and damn well used every single one of his picks and even added to them last year. But I do think that because he's got the extra picks this season due to the you know, the Rodgers trade from last offseason and a couple of those other ones that he made, I do wonder if he's kind of looking at it like, I've got this extra capital and I'm going to just use it on a player that, you know, maybe there's a couple dings on his prospect card, but we really like the things that he does well. So, you know, I've got an extra second and I'm going to use it on a guy that should be an explosive playmaker. So definitely have Benson up there. And to kind of curtail it into a player you both brought up too, Brooks is one where, because of when he suffered his ACL injury, I believe it was late October or early November. I know everyone's going to say, like, he should be ready, but he's not going to be himself in 2024. That's just how these things work, especially for someone who's playing an athletic position like running back. Yeah, he might be back, but he won't be, you know, fully he won't have his full explosiveness. He won't have the trust, the mental trust in that knee that that guys need to be able to crack off some of those jump cuts or the spin moves or just the juke in the hole that is second nature to these guys. He's going to be out there at least certain points where he's going to second guess himself. So that's where you question yourself with those kind of injuries and the comeback. But I do wonder if they have an extra third this season. Does he get used at one of those third round picks because we've got an extra one? And I know some people don't like that mentality, but like I said, if the goal is to win sooner than later, you're not it's not like you're trading up for him or anything like that, or Benson in a similar way of thinking, but you do have extra capital in these rounds where you would normally take a guy like that, or it would be a steal of a pick to get him. So I do wonder if Benson and Brooks are guys that they're kind of like, I know they have injury history, but we do have an extra pick in the second and third round. So do we just say, we'll make it work and stuff? So having that extra draft capital, it does open up extra avenues of mobility for Gutekunst to pick a guy who might have a couple injury question marks on him.
Yeah, I think the Packers.
Go ahead, Sarah. No, you're good.
I was just gonna say, I think the Packers are certainly interested. If they get to the point that you're saying, Mike, I think that they really think hard about what they're gonna do. And I know that it was reported that the Packers talked to Jonathan Brooks at the Combine. So clearly they see the good and they see the upside, and maybe they're just asking him questions about his recovery, what that looks like. I know Ian Rappaport tweeted, it was on February 26th, that his medical team expects him to be cleared by training camp. I'm with you, Mike, though. I don't know. I think being cleared and being 100% back to yourself are two very different things. And one of the benefits of drafting like a superstar running back like this, and you saw this past season with Robinson and with Gibbs, it's just that burst. When they break through, you're like, holy cow, that is a young back who's running their ass off and looks fantastic. And that's what I think everybody kind of wants to see in the Packers offense, is have a guy that can just burst through like that, kind of like back in the day with Eddie Lacy, where you're just like, wow, he's a young buck and he's ready to run. And so that's what I think, if you had a healthy Jonathan Brooks, that's what you're getting. But certainly if, he ends up falling further than people think, and the Packers have some extra draft picks in those rounds, I think they highly consider what that could look like for them.
Well, yeah, that's what I was just going to say, that if what's Mike's saying is maybe if Brooks slides to like the third round, there's no way the Packers can pass up on that. Go ahead and take him in the third round, let him sit a year if he has to, or slowly integrate him in. That's where you got to, and the big question is are they going to have the Aaron Jones in there? Are they going to have another veteran in there? Because if they do, and you don't need him right off the bat, then go ahead and take him with the third round.
And it's a no-brainer. Yeah.
Yeah. Just rotate him in there, let him get some game time, and then once he feels 100% comfortable, let him go. And I have to say that if I'm a kid that's recovering from an ACL, it seems like I want to go with the Packers, because other than David Bakhtiari, look at the last few ACL guys that we've had who have had miraculous recoveries. Rashawn Gary, Elton Jenkins, both came back sooner than anybody figured that they were going to come back. And they came back relatively, maybe not 100% back to their normal selves, but they were damn close.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, the offensive line historically in Green Bay has always been very good at protecting the running backs. And so if, I'm in his shoes and I'm coming back from an injury, I think it would be a little comforting to know, okay, I have one of the best lines in the league that has my back here, and that's clearing space for me, and that can protect me. And that probably goes a long way mentally too. I mean, that's another thing is coming back from an injury like that is just as big of a mental hurdle as it is physical. And, in the NFL, everything is quicker, everything's faster. And so that's probably a shock, whether you're healthy or not, whether you're healthy. And if you're not, then it's probably even worse.
Yeah. Now, I want to kind of go back to Benson for a minute real quick. When Sarah was describing the stuff that he did, and I want to throw this out there, and I want to reiterate from last year. I don't throw comps around, player comps around too often. I don't believe in it because I believe everybody's their own self. But when Sarah was describing it, it made it sound like this would be like a Jamal Williams 2.0 coming back. He's not built like a Dylan. He's not built like a Eddie Lacy, but he's still got that thumper mentality. And, he's got that pass protection, that pass catch ability. He's got enough wiggle to get him through, and he's got that speed to get him through. If we can put, and that, let's be honest, that's what's been missing from the running back room forever since, Jamal left in free agency, was to have that 1-2 punch of Aaron Jones and that maybe not bruiser back like a what you hoped Dylan was going to be, but that guy that's going to get you that extra little bit if you need him to, or be that lead guy if Aaron gets let's say another hamstring injury or whatever, that you can rely on this guy to be that lead back.
Yeah, I think the big angle there, and like I said, it's gonna be interesting to see. We'll be able to tell based on what kind of guys they, whether they target in a trade or if they're able to get, a second week or third week free agent signing at the position, and then what they do early in the draft. But like I said, it'll be interesting to see what their philosophy is, because I think one of the big problems with the Dylan Jones pairing is that Jones is really special in terms of he can do everything, but also the fact that he'll be effective if you give him 5 touches, 15, or 25. And really, he only tops out there because, at some point, fatigue does have to set in for anyone who's playing this sport. But otherwise, like, he's a home run hitter. He's a 3-point shooter who just knocking him down at a ridiculous clip, no matter how many touches you give him. Whereas Dylan, he's a throwback to the power backs of a yesteryear era where it's like, okay, to get the best out of him, he's got to touch the ball 25 plus times, and if he doesn't, he's not feeling how the blocking scheme is going. He's not getting a good feel of where the holes are and stuff like that. So that's where I kind of lean into the whole, like, just draft more Aaron Jones types, because you want as many guys who can just maximize their touches. And Benson is a guy like that. The Jamal Williams comp, in terms of how he and the hypothetical of how Benson and Jones would be able to play off each other, that would be the ideal, and why I have him high up on my board, because Benson did play in a pretty a decently heavy rotation at Florida State. And so he's used to having his snaps split, and you still saw him just, that's where the Forrest Gump comp is pretty funny and pretty spot on for him, because he's like, all right, I'm just going to make the most out of this one. And, being timed at 4.39 in the 40 at the combine definitely helps. And it does. I didn't think he was that fast necessarily, but it does kind of speak to the kind of athlete that he is, that you do see on film where, he's a guy who can, if he hits the play front side and he just breaks through, yeah, he can take it the distance. Or if he goes pirouettes around 2 people, breaks it back a couple times, and it's like, oh, I guess he's still going to outrun everyone after he's changed directions like 5 times on the same play. So, and, that's something that we've seen Jones do. As a rookie, we saw him break that touchdown against the Bucs. We saw him almost save the Packers this year against the 49ers with that 50-yard run or whatever it was. And just getting another guy or a couple guys who can do that this draft would be, absolutely ideal for the Packers. Sarah, is there anyone else that you had on your wish list of going into the draft, or anyone who kind of caught your eye?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're necessarily on my top 2 kind of. I mean, Brooks and Benson were definitely the 2 that stood out to me the most, but there are a couple other guys that I thought were at least worth having a conversation about. One, it's the elephant in the room. Everybody's talking about Blake Corum and what's going to happen there, especially after the year that he had at Michigan. I think, he doesn't have some of the explosive big back qualities that we were just talking about with Benson and Brooks, but his vision is where he really excels, the football IQ. I think for me, the biggest question mark with him and my hesitation about it is how much did he benefit from the system at Michigan? And I lean toward the camp of it benefited him, definitely, but it didn't necessarily build him. I still think that he's a good player, that wherever he lands, he'll probably, as long as he's utilized properly, be a decent back. The big thing, which I know it's never going to happen for the Packers, is the size. And you talked about this, Mike. Packers GMs, for some reason, if you don't pass that test, if you don't check those boxes, if you don't have the RAS score or whatever it is that they look at, they tend to look the other way. But I think, despite his size, he's able to do a lot. I don't think he's necessarily the perfect fit for the Packers, and people may be upset with me that I said that because some people have a big draft crush on him. But the reason,
Mike.
but
don't worry. I'm gonna let Sarah have hers, and I will do my quorum talk later. But no, please continue, Sarah.
The reason, my biggest hesitation with him is, for me personally, it's not the size. I know that's probably a thing for the Packers, but I think the bigger concern is his hands. He's never really been called to participate in the pass game. And like I said before, in today's NFL, you have to have experience doing that. And with the Packers and the way that their offense is built, you see the way that they utilize Jones in the passing game. They've tried it with Dillon. So I just think they want to find a guy who's able to do both. And at this point, he hasn't had enough experience for them to be super excited about it. So that's kind of just my overall thoughts. I think he's a great player. I just don't know if he's the perfect fit for the Packers. I think, agree with you, Mike, what you said about they need a guy who every single touch is going to make the most of it. And then one other from Notre Dame, Audric Esme, I just think, again, he's a guy that could go third or fourth or early fourth, that when I see him and I watch him play, I'm like, yeah, he passes the eye test. He's just definitely freak athlete, but also a little bit deceiving of how fast he is for his frame and how big he is. Didn't see the field the first couple of years a lot, but then once he did, was certainly a difference maker. And like I said, this is a guy I think probably goes a little bit later in the draft, but wherever he lands will probably be a pretty productive back. It will probably land somewhere where they already have an RB1, and he'd be, supporting back and complementing them in that way. And he was another guy that it was reported that the Packers talked to him. So clearly they kind of probably see this same thing, that, hey, he could be a complementary player to Aaron Jones if AJ Dillon is on the way out. It sounds lame, but from the combine, there's been a lot of great clips of him just being himself. And it seems like he has a great personality, could kind of fit into the culture that they're building in Green Bay. And, maybe if you lose a personality guy in AJ Dillon, then you bring in one in Estime. So just kind of another one that catches my eye, that probably, again, will fall and be available in the Packers' sweet spot where they've drafted running backs in the past.
And if you're wanting a true AJ Dillon replacement, he would probably be the guy to do it, because he's built about the same way. They have similar play styles, but I think Esme is going to be able to do what Dillon couldn't in actually being that power back that the Packers need. Watched him. I really liked what I saw out of him, and that's exactly what I saw when I was watching him, was just that, you want a true replacement for AJ Dillon. This is your true replacement for AJ Dillon, but hopefully a better version of AJ Dillon. Because let's face it, I've ragged on AJ Dillon forever now. I mean, the last few years, he was an athletic type. He was supposed to be better than what he was, but for some reason, whether it was he was in the wrong scheme, he was in the wrong, whatever it was, he just never lived up to the hype. So if we can get a guy that's built the same, that tests the same, but actually can put it all together for the Packers, I'd be all for it, and it would be the perfect complement to Aaron Jones, because even though Jones doesn't have like the top-notch speed, he is more of your scat back type of runner that when you get him, in a perfect world, all we're going to need, all we're wanting is for Esme to come in and do, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, and get those 2 yards so we can get that first down. And then again, he could be the type of guy that if Aaron goes down, hamstring, foot injury, whatever, is taking him out that we've seen in the past, then he can be that lead back, and then we can not lose a step in that process. So yeah, I think it's a great one. He's a great one to look at. I've got no issues with him. I can't find my note on him, but I didn't, if I remember right, I didn't see much out of the pass game for him, so I couldn't really speak on what his abilities were there. But running wise, he'd be a good prospect for the Packers.
Joe, who are your guys?
Well, I've got my draft crush this year for the running backs, and Brian Maffey and I have went back and forth on him because we both love him, but there are some issues. He is kind of an older prospect, but Ray Davis out of Kentucky, he's
Dusty Evely's own Ray Davis.
yeah, and I really like what I saw out of him. He's not big. He kind of fits the Packers' size requirements, but when you look at him, I wrote it down here that he's smaller, but he looks bulkier. So it looks like he's kind of a bigger Aaron Jones in a sense, to where he can handle the load a little bit better. I thought he had good balance, and I guess Aaron Jones would be a good comp because he runs through tackles. He's got good vision, nice pass catcher. He's listed five. He was listed 5'8", 220. Now I don't know what they said about him in the combine. I didn't get a chance to look at what he actually measured out at, but we all know that when you go off of school measurements, they're not always the most reliable.
They're a
But
little inflated. Yeah.
The
yeah,
NFL,
just a little
the
bit.
NFL's listing, they do have him at 5'8" even, so that's decent for him.
Did they have anything listed on his weight? Because that was the one thing that I was kind of curious about.
They got him at 211.
Okay, so he came in a little bit lighter than what the school had him listed at. So, but that's still a good solid running back for the Packers. But I also said that his speed looked solid. I didn't think it was like immaculate speed where he was going to be running 25 mile per hour on the field, but it was well, what's the word for it? It was it's workable speed where it's going to be like an Aaron Jones where he'll break it, but he's not going to make it all the way. Somebody's going to catch him, but he's going to get a good chunk of yards through it. And what I saw out of the pass catching with him is, I thought he was pretty good with it. He was a playmaker there, and he looked pretty decent as a pass blocker. But hopefully, that's not what you're more using him as. You're going to use him as more of a pure runner or the guy that you swing out on a screen or something. But that's my guy. That's my draft crush so far for the running backs.
Anyone else?
I've got a whole book full of them, Mike. Do we really want to go through this?
All right. So,
no, I've got a couple that I can mention. Montrell Johnson from Florida, I thought was a pretty solid runner. I didn't get to see too much of him, but what I did, it really looked, good speed, good listed size. He did have some concentration drops. It was more, he was looking upfield more than anything, and he just didn't look the ball in. He was a tough runner. And then another one that I want to mention here as a good solid replacement for Dylan that also kind of dips back into the small school running back or small school prospect. He came from the same school as Craft, Isaiah Davis out of SDSU. Now this is where Maffey and I kind of disagreed. I said that he was probably going to, in the NFL, he's probably going to be more of a fullback than a running back, but how Maffey is when you argue with him. I said he had good balance. He had okay speed, but he was not a burner by any means. He was slippery. I thought he ran a little too upright, and maybe that's why it hurt his speed a little bit more. Good vision. And I said maybe a late round Dillon replacement, decent pass catcher, and he had a smooth one cut. I mean, without I didn't write down what they had him listed as, but he's a big guy. I think I used the old term that he was built like a brick shit house, and that's just pretty much what what he looked like, because he was a big guy, and with what he was able to do, and the reason why I said he probably could play a little bit more as a fullback was because they actually used him as a lead blocker a few different times, and he was good at it. I mean, and this is where Mafi came back. Oh well, he was doing it against 210-pound, 220. Yeah, okay, I get that, but he's still got the skill to be able to do it at the next level, because that's one of those things that if you can learn to do it right, you can learn to do it against anybody. You may not be good at it when you can do it against somebody bigger than what you're doing now, but you have the ability to do it. So, yeah.
Putting it in context, pony package, you can be the lead blocker on the pony package. So everything.
And I can't pronounce the guy's last name for nothing, but the fullback from San Francisco, Jusek.
Juszczyk.
There you go. I never said I was good at names. I think Davis could fit that role as that type of fullback, where it's not your traditional fullback like a John Kuhn or a William Henderson or something like that, but the playmaker type fullback out of the backfield. Those were my couple. I'll let you go ahead and give you some, and then I got a couple more I can mention here.
So you guys, we already did deep dive into Trey Benson. Marshawn Lloyd from USC is another guy that I like, just because kind of Swiss Army knife. Had a little bit of like some kind of fumbling issues that popped up every now and then, but overall, I thought he was a pretty good playmaker. And Bucky Irving was another one from Oregon, where just the ability to create a big play out of nothing. Because like I said, we're looking at guys that are going to be, when they get picked on draft day, and you get the usual like, who is this player from either NFL Network or ESPN? You're going to get the not a complete back, part-time player, blah blah blah. And honestly, when you're picking in, the late day 2, day 3 range, you're going to be getting a guy who has, I don't want to say holes in their game, but question marks around their game that need to be answered. And I'm going to dovetail that into my Wolverine Blake Corum take. And honestly, Sarah, you hit a lot of the big benchmark points. The first thing off the bat is, a lot of people are comparing him to Aaron Jones. They're two totally different backs. The only reason that there's a comparison is because they're both on the shorter side. But what makes Jones special is he should be the walking definition, the walking, living, breathing definition of getting skinny in the hole, where he can, at full speed, turn his shoulders, tilt himself, and just disappear as he turns the corner, and then he pops out on the other side and is just gone for a 20-yard gain. That's not what Corum does. Corum actually, he runs more like LaDainian Tomlinson did, where he's gonna hit the hole. He almost always reads the right hole. Like you said, Sarah, you can kind of quibble with how much of that is him, how much of that is Michigan's, just dominant offensive line. But he was doing that back in 2020 when he was a true freshman, when our O-line was still kind of shits. So he's definitely shown the ability to do that when he's, the line isn't as dominant. But what he does is he's not necessarily getting skinny in the hole. He's going to give you that double jump cut that LT used to be able to do, and he'll just ghost guys in space. And it's a totally different running style than what Jones brings to the table. And but the biggest holes are ones that you pointed out. He's shorter than Jones. He's over a full inch shorter than Jones is. He is on the older side. He's going to turn 23 this season. Actually, relative to what Jones's birthday is December. Jones turned 23 his rookie year. Corum is going to turn 23, but I think his birthday is in November, so kind of the same age. durability is going to be something that will get questioned. 2021, he missed time with a high ankle sprain. 22, he had a knee injury that required surgery that he missed, basically didn't play against Ohio State, and he missed the TCU playoff game. And you did see it, he was good most of this past season, but it wasn't until the Penn State game where you really saw him able to kind of chain jump cuts back together, where you had sort of that full confidence back in that knee, the explosiveness out of his jump cut. And so that'll definitely be something. And then the big one that you brought up, Sarah, is his ability as a pass catcher. And it's really been the biggest hole in his game, is that that's why Donovan Edwards has the role that he has in Michigan's offense, is because he is the guy that could legitimately line up as a slot in the NFL. Whereas Corum, Michigan fans won't like me saying this, but the touchdown he scored against Alabama is one of the few downfield routes he ran as a Michigan Wolverine. Most of his receptions are as just a traditional check down, where he's just, he's pass proing, which he does well. Even though he's a shorter running back, he'll stick his face in a blitzing linebacker. But he will. Most of his catches are, okay, there's no one blitzing, I'm gonna take 2 steps, turn around, and wait for the ball. And that was like 90-something% of his receptions at Michigan. He wasn't running a wheel route. Not many swings. He had a couple here and there. No real text routes. I know this is like from 3 years ago, but he had a bad drop against Michigan State where he had no one in front of him. And so it's one of those where it's one of those where if he was a better pass catcher, maybe the Packers overlooked the height, injury history, the age kind of thing. Whereas like I said, he's around, as a draft prospect, he's around the same age that Jones was, but Jones was a markedly better pass catcher coming out of UTEP. And so it's that whole, okay, and even then Jones was a 5th round pick. So it's like, you've got these 4 things on Corum where it's like, these are knocks against his game. And I won't say he's totally off the Packers board, but it gets into the whole, is someone else willing to overlook all of those negatives before Green Bay is? And that's sort of, that's where I agree that I don't think he'll be a Packer, because I think some team is going to be like, we're going to take the guy that was the dynamite running back at Michigan, and we're going to take him round 3. And Goot isn't even going to be thinking of, he's going to have his eye on a guy like if Benson slides there. Or, like I said, it's more likely that Gutekunst would roll the dice on Brooks than he would take Corum as early as the end of day 2. So that's sort of where I am on Corum. I'd love to see, I'm a homer. I'm a unabashed homer. I'd love to see more Michigan Wolverines that I can cheer for in the NFL, but being totally honest and realistic, it's not unless he slides to like the 6th round, it's very unlikely that he's going to be a Packer. And I just think that there's too many teams who are going to see all of the highlight plays and all of the things that he does really well, and they're going to draft him a lot earlier than Green Bay would think of drafting him for those reasons. Anyone that you guys are just like, please, dear God, no, do not let them be a Packer, a draft pick this season. I'll be the first to break the ice on this one. I've seen some people mention his name already. Will Shipley, please. We do not need Will Shipley. I mean, basically, he's just a younger version of Patrick Taylor to me, and I think the version of Patrick Taylor post-foot operation is a better player than Will Shipley is going to be as an NFL prospect. So that's the top of my list, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to nuke all the Wisconsin Green Bay fans. Braylon Allen is a worse running back prospect than A.J. Dillon was. And if you can't say that with a straight face as a Badger fan, your homerism is showing. So go, Sarah. After I've just raised the intensity and anger.
We're done for.
Right. That's okay. They can come for me. Joe, Sarah, who are your guys?
I was actually a little nervous about Braylon Allen too. I just think that Packers fan, and it's more of Packers fans than it is him. So thanks to anyone listening. But I don't know if it's because I'm scarred with the Leonard situation, where every time the Packers defense sucks, the fans start slamming the table for him. But I'm just like, no, we just need to stop this from happening. With the Watts, it was like a similar fantasy of like, oh, they're from Wisconsin, so they have to be on the Packers. And I don't know. I just don't love that thought process. I kind of agree with you, Mike. Like, it's a little Homer-like in that sense. But so that's what scares me, is just how much of this is you believing in ability, seeing that it's the right fit, seeing that this is someone who realistically would complement Aaron Jones. That's what you have to think about too, rather than just, I love this player because they were a Badger and now they have to be a Packer because that's how it works. So again, I don't think he's a bad player by any means. I just think the conversations around him are where I get a little nervous, because I'm sort of like, what are your intentions? What are your intentions with Braylon Allen? Where are you coming from here? But so if I had to pick one, it would be that.
And I say it all the time, you got to take the uniform off of him. You know, it's the same thing we hear every year when TJ Watt does another thing, you know. Oh, well, we could have had TJ Watt, but instead they traded down and took Kevin King. Okay, well, we would have had TJ Watt, but we would have had Ladarius Gunther chasing down Julio Jones for another playoff game. So, you know, get over it. And I'll be first to admit, I do it with Iowa guys. Mike does it with Michigan guys. It happens. But, you know, at least we can think unbiasedly about it. Yeah, there you go.
We can take one of the rosy colored tinted glasses. We can pop one of the lenses out and be at least half honest with ourselves.
Because let's face it, I mean, the big name this year and this goes away from the running backs, but the big name for an Iowa guy is Cooper DeJean, and of course, you know, 90% of Packer fans are calling for him. I get it. I would love to see him on the Packers, just like I would love seeing Lucas Van Ness on the Packers get drafted last year. But he's going to come with some issues, and that's because he comes from a defense that isn't run like what the Packers are going to be running. It's the same thing with Braylon Allen. Yeah, he did great for you guys for, you know, what, half a season, or he did one good season where he was talked about as a Heisman candidate, and then he had another half a season. I get it. You know, he did great for your program, but is he going to be able to produce that in the NFL? And so far, things are showing no. If the Packers draft him, hey, whatever, we'll go with that. But anyway, my one is, and actually I've got two, and this goes to show that my homerism doesn't shine through. Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue. He started he was with the Hawkeyes for 2 years before he transferred out to Purdue, and he was more hyped than anything. I don't know how many times that, oh well, he's in the lineup and he's going to have a big game, and he dropped, you know, 10 catches, and, you know, on an end around he got maybe 2 yards, or, you know, it just, there was more hype than there was production with him. I don't know what he did with Purdue, so I can't say maybe he turned it around, but now a lot of people are talking about him because he was testing well at the combine. Okay, well, we all know the combine, you can't go off of everything. You got to go with production and just kind of use the combine as like a peripheral view to it, which leads into my number 2 guy. And this one probably is my number 1 guy because um, and this is going to hurt even more because we were just talking about Braylon Allen being a Badger, and, you know, Packers fans and their Badgers. Well, this guy transferred from Wisconsin to Louisville, and now he's become the combine darling, and that's Isaac Orindo. And for what he is, he's not a bad running back, but for being a quote unquote power back, there's no power to him. When he's just like any other regular running back that if they find the crease, lights out. He's good. But when you're asking him to get the short yardage, to push the pile, to do everything else, he's worse than what AJ Dillon was doing. There's no real fight to him for being, like I said, the quote unquote power back. And I don't know how many times I kept hearing him called a power back when I was watching Louisville tape on him. So those two, even though the RAS score is going to be high, and I know how, even though Goody says that we don't follow the RAS, but they tend to draft high RAS guys, I really hope that they stay away from those two, because unless they have like the running back whisperer and can get into their ear and really teach them how to do things, I just don't see them being overly productive. Now, I have hopes for Garindo, because at least I know he has the ability to do things like a every down back, like a Aaron Jones or everything, where he can, once he gets the seam, or if he can find hit the right hole at the right time, he's gone. But don't expect him to push the line for anything.
I think that's one of the keys with running backs is it's like, so the way I've always put it is not that anyone is a sure thing or there's a direct correlation or translation, but I try not to read too much into quote unquote college power backs, because how much of that is you just being the most physically dominant player because you are just that much better than your competition, or is it because you actually are good at, like you said, Joe, actually pushing the pile, creating leverage, all of that, creating space where there is none and stuff like that, or is it just because you were just bigger, faster, stronger than everyone around you?
And I think that's what it was with Garindo, is that he was like 6'1", 220 or something like that, and he looks like he should be a power back. So okay, well, he looks like, we might as well just call him that. And he what I was watching, no, it just it frustrated me, because I'd hear, oh, now they're going to be bringing the power back on 3rd and 1, and okay, now we're at 4th and 2.
Oh, that's just music to Packers fans' ears. But like we said, and one player I forgot to touch on a little bit is Emmanuel Wilson, who, okay, it's hard to read the situation because it's one of those where it's like, if Dylan's healthy, how many of the playoff snaps does Wilson actually see? But the part where I'm kind of like, maybe they did trust him, maybe they did like what they got from him, is like, they didn't bring back Patrick Taylor again. That's much to Joe's elation. They cut Kenyon Drake, and they kept Wilson as running back 2 for the 2 playoff games. So, you don't want to read too far into that, but the way I look at it is, on some level, Wilson became a player that they trusted to do the things they want their running backs to do. And how that feeds into what Green Bay does in the offseason is, okay, so he's a ERFA, exclusive rights free agent, which basically means that if Green Bay wants him around, he'll be back, and he's cheap. So how that plays into this is, if you have Jones and Wilson, whether he takes a tiny step forward or a big step forward, that's great. You have another guy who's done stuff at the NFL level and in playoff games. But then you can say, okay, we have running back 1 and running back 2. Are those positions set in concrete? No, but at least you have answers to the tests to open the season. And then, like we said, does that afford Gutekunst the ability to sleep better at night, that I took a guy who might be on PUP to start the season if he takes Jonathan Brooks in the 3rd round? Or, okay, Benson has some injury questions, but I've got 2 running backs in the room who will kind of show him the ropes and stuff like that. So do want to give Wilson his due. Like I said, it's hard to read into it because he kind of only was, how much of it is he had earned, LaFleur them's trust, which I kind of do think he did, because a lot of the talk to start the season was, he's not ready yet. We don't, there's things he needs to do better and all that kind of stuff. And he did, like I said, as much as I know it raised Joe's blood pressure, they didn't bring back Patrick Taylor for a 3rd go around this season, and they cut Kenyon Drake, and if they really didn't trust Wilson, they probably keep one of those 2 guys, and they're like, all right, AJ, we know you're not 100%, but we need you to go, buddy. Like, they're probably pushing him harder to go and stuff. So I do think that there's the basis of a player that they're like, we don't want him to be running back one necessarily, but if he's got to get 10 to 15 snaps a game, we're okay with that. And that is something very tangible and important for an NFL roster to have. That, like I said, you don't need a rookie to be a starter from day one, or even that level of this guy's going to get 10 to 15 snaps in a game kind of contributor. And it just buys time for a rookie to, like you said, Joe, get his feet wet, get in the system, get the stuff between the ears. A lot of the stuff that we talked about with this receiving room where they weren't afforded that because you had Watson and Dobbs get injured, at the end of preseason. And it was just like, all right, we're going to run the shit you guys do know how to do, and we're going to just close our eyes and pray on the ones that we're not super certain that you guys know what to do. So, it's all that stuff where it's like, trust Jones to run the right way on a play. We think Wilson is going to run the right way on a run play. We're not like, oh God, we've got this rookie out here, and I just hope he knows that the run is to the left and not to the right kind of thing. So, and as someone who's played Pop Warner quarterback, there's nothing more disconcerting when you turn around on a run play and you're like, uh-oh. But Sarah, any other thoughts that you have for the running back class?
No, I think we covered all of it. Like I said, no clear, especially with some injuries, superstar have to get early. But I think it's going to be a really interesting draft this year because some guys may fall and some teams will be faced with, do we make the decision now or do we let them pass? So it'll be really interesting. I'm excited and I'm hopeful for what the Packers end up doing.
There's one name that all of us forgot to mention, and I think he'll be the first one off the board, is Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. I just think with the way he tested and all that with his production from college and all that, he'll be the first one off the board.
Yeah. And I don't think there's any realm of imagination where Green Bay is going to take a running back in round one. The board would have to fall in the most weird way ever for that to even be a possibility. But yeah, I think that's the key, is that, every year we hear that running backs don't matter until you don't have one. So it'll be really interesting to see where Gutekunst and the Packers front office draw that line in the sand and where they're able to toe that line, or if they just see the guy they like and they're just like, screw it, that's our guy, we're taking him, kind of like they did with Lacey back in 2013. But that's going to be a wrap for us on our 2024 running back preview. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time out of catching up on jet lag and joining us here for your, like you said, your lone draft obligation. Thank you so much. Please take the time again to plug your work here, and you have the floor right now.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. I mean, it's hard to believe an hour went by just like that. I looked up in the corner and saw an hour and 8 minutes and was honestly shocked. That flew by, but, great conversation. But like I mentioned, I'm on the Pack a Day podcast every Wednesday. So you can follow me at Sarah Kelliher 4, and then at Pack a Day podcast is where those episodes are available. So thank you both for having me. This is great. And I guess we'll be prepared to do it again next year for my annual draft episode.
Attitude we want. Yes, excellent. No, thank you so much for coming on, Sarah. Really appreciate it. Like I said, that's Joe. I'm Mike. Oh boy, it's been 5 weeks since I've done this. Let's see if I still remember how to do the outro. Giveaway. So we did cross the first giveaway. We gave away the John Kuhn 5x8, Joe. 5x8, right? Or 8x10?
8x10. And the guy or the person that drew still has not got a hold of me. So we're gonna give him a bit. And if he still doesn't, maybe we'll throw it back out there and redraw some names and see what happens with it.
So we're in the 250 range right now. So the next drawing is going to be at 523. That'll be for the Jair Alexander.
Keep an eye out. We might change it a little bit because I've been cleaning out some stuff and I've found some things that we could probably do a giveaway on.
Audibles all the time. That's how we do it here on OPE. But yep, thank you very much for listening to this episode. Please follow the podcast. Make sure. Going back to the giveaway, you've got to be following the podcast on Twitter at Ohana _Packers, not Joe or me individually, you will not be entered in the drawing. Please check out our website, ohanapackers.org. You have all the streams are posted there. All of the wonderful posts from all of our authors are on there. We're going to be putting up more content with the draft coming on strong. Please follow the podcast on whatever app you use. Please give us a like and a subscribe if you're enjoying what you're hearing. Honestly, whichever way you go on the feedback, we appreciate any of it, positive or negative, because we want to make sure that we're providing the content that you're looking for. We move along. Joe, what's our next episode?
And just remember, Mike is the one that was talking shit about Wisconsin. So if you have anything to say about remember to go after him.
Talk all preseason was that Wisconsin was going to walk its way easily to the Big Ten championship game this season. Luke Fickell was going to fix everything. They were going to put Michigan down on its face and make us embarrassed. You know what? None of it happened, so I don't give a rat's ass to what any of you think. AJ Dillon is better than Braylon Allen. But you heard it here. Joe, anything else that you wanted to add to that one?
No, I think next episode should be offensive line, and I think we have Fred Thurston joining us that week.
Right on. But yep, that's going to do it for us on the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. We thank Sarah Kelliher again. We want to wish you a Go Pack Go and aloha.